Hey guys, Tyler here, and I'm going to share with you my five most impactful personal development sources. The five people I would probably attribute a lot of my personal development over the last 10, 11, 12 years that I've been in entrepreneurship, that I've been investing in myself. And I spend at least an hour every single day listening to something, reading something, mostly listening to things or watching things that are feeding my mind. And I'm going to share with you the most impactful. Now, the first one is none other than Tony Robbins. So if you guys have followed me before, there's no secret that Tony Robbins has been a huge impact, a huge influence on my life. I actually went to my first Tony Robbins event. I think I was either 15 or 16. So I was very young. I went to his Unleash the Power Within experience in London. I've been to multiple of his events since. I'm actually going to another one later this year in December. And I even remember, like, around that age, when I was on the bus to school, I would be listening to Tony Robbins. I'd get back from school, go on my laptop, and while I was doing homework, I'd be listening to Tony Robbins. So Tony is a peak performance strategist. Some people have a bit of a misconception that he's a motivational speaker, but maybe if you're listening to this like me, you don't really lack motivation. Yes, there is an element of inspiration and motivation that comes as a byproduct of listening to him, but really where Tony is misunderstood is actually his teachings are real practical things that you can implement into your life and really just become the best version of yourself. His work covers a whole host of areas. I mean, his events are 3, 4, 5, 6 days long. I remember going to his business mastery event in Vegas when I was 80, and I believe that was 5 days, and you'd start at 9 a.m. and some nights you'd finish at 12 a.m., 1 a.m. in the morning. So they're very intense, very immersive. And really he teaches personal mastery, business growth, psychology of achievement, and wealth strategies. So really, I would encourage you to immerse yourself in Tony's content to better understand your psychology, change your perspective on various different things, and then also from a business perspective as well. You guys, again, if you've listened to my content before, you'll know that I believe a lot of success, whether it's in business, with your finances, with your relationships, a lot of it is downstream from mastering your psychology, mastering your emotions, and that's kind of one of the overarching themes of Tony's teachings. Another big thing is, like, he teaches you how to master your physical state, so you can really snap yourself into a state of certainty, a state of conviction, a state of energy. And so really a couple resources that I'd recommend you start with if you can get yourself to an Unleash the Power Within experience. This is, I believe, it's either a 3 or 4 day experience. This is kind of his introduction event. It's life-changing, to say the least. And if you ask anyone that's been, they'll tell you the same. It's very transformational. Yes, it does cost a bit of money, but it's one of the best investments you will ever make. And I'm not sure how many years Tony has left, being totally honest. He's getting to an age now where he is starting to wind down on his events. So I would book yourself on with a matter of urgency. And then I'm going to share some links in the description. If you want to check out Tony, there's a presentation he did at a Salesforce event. I believe this was in around 2016, around that kind of time. It's a almost 3-hour presentation that he did where he covers a lot of his core concepts. And so it's an event called Dreamforce. I'll drop the link in the description. I'd highly recommend checking out Tony. So let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is none other than Jim Rohn. So Jim Rohn is a generation prior to Tony Robbins. Unfortunately, he isn't around anymore, but he was actually the mentor to Tony. So Tony first got into the personal development space by getting in proximity with Jim, by, I think, working with and learning from Jim. And Jim just he's an amazing speaker, amazing presenter, an amazing humor as well. There's a bit of comedy to his talks. And Jim is someone that I've definitely not spent as much time going into Jim's content as I have with Tony, but Jim is just someone that I listen to some mornings. So especially in the mornings, before I kind of start my workday, I always want to be priming my mind, priming my body, and conditioning my mind. Just like you go to the gym every day to work out your body, I believe you have to do the same with your mind, especially to get into the right state going into your day. And so oftentimes gym is a choice of mine where I'll go onto YouTube, I'll go onto Spotify, and I'll just play any random Jim Rohn video. And really just talks about, as we say here, timeless principles on success, discipline, and personal responsibility. It's almost like 101 of personal development. So if you're completely new to personal development, I would highly recommend starting with some of Jim and then also Tony as well. And again, I'll share a link in the description. There's a really good, I believe it's a 4-hour seminar that he did here, where he covers a lot of concepts, and you get a good introduction to who he is, his humor, and his teachings. And this is just something that you just play on the background, play it on your TV, play it while you're going for a walk, just play 30 minutes in the morning when you wake up to kind of prime your mind going into your work day, or play it when you're driving into work or between appointments. And if you don't have YouTube Premium, I highly recommend you get YouTube Premium. It's the best investment you can make. So you can listen to these videos, like I say, while you're driving, walking, running. These moments where you have what we call no extra time. It's like if you're driving, you're spending 30 minutes in the car, you may as well do something productive. Instead of listening to music or brain dead radio presenters, listen to something that's feeding your mind. So that's Jim Rohn. Moving on to number 3. Number 3 is one where it's a little bit more esoteric. So esoteric means it's kind of a little bit harder to understand, a little bit less tangible, a bit more philosophical. And this is Neville Goddard. Now, Neville is someone that actually, it's more recently that I've spent some time listening to. I had a very inspiring conversation with now a friend. It was one of the first few times I met them. It was a couple months ago. He's a very successful business owner from the US, does $50-60 million per year. And he spoke about how Neville Goddard was a huge influence on his life. And so I decided actually to invest a bit more time. But I've listened to some of Neville's stuff or Neville's teachings in the past. Again, Neville is a previous generation, probably even a previous generation to Jim Rohn. Again, one of the OGs. And the reason he's a little bit more esoteric and philosophical is he kind of exists in the metaphysical a little bit, but he teaches the power of imagination and assumption and shows how our inner beliefs and mental pictures directly shape external reality. And he taught practical methods for consciously creating the life we desire. One of the favorite things I have about Neville's teachings, which you will then see other personal development kind of mentors speak about as well, that were in later generations from Neville, but Neville called it act as if, or thinking from the end. And he really speaks about the importance of getting clear and imagining who you want to be and who you need to be in the future, the version of yourself that, like I've spoken about before, is living this life that you've ideally designed, or this life you desire, and then thinking as if you are that person, acting as if you are that person. And as you begin to do that, the external starts to mold around you to kind of match and make real this life that you're manifesting, if you like. And I think manifestation is wildly misunderstood. So there's a video here which is a great summary on Neville's kind of thinking from the end, or act as if philosophy. There's also a religious element to his teaching. So if you are religious, you might also get some benefit from that perspective. He actually believes that imagination is essentially your God. But I'll let you guys listen to Neville, and if that sounds attractive to you, then definitely go down that rabbit hole. So number 4 is Dr. John DeMartini. This is actually one of my favorites. So these are in no particular order. Tony has definitely been the most influential, most impactful. Dr. John Martini is someone that I think is massively underrated. I don't see too many people speak about him, but he's a human behavior expert and philosopher, known for the values factor and also the DeMartini method, and teaching how aligning your life with your highest values creates purpose, wealth, and fulfillment. A lot of John's work is, how do you get yourself to be the most aligned version of yourself, where your life and your actions is where you can tap into this life force that And this is a process I've had to go through over recent years as well, where you really have to figure out like what within your life, what is it you want to achieve? What is it you want to do that is going to be most fulfilling to you, that feels most aligned for you, where if you are doing that, you can tap into this energy, this life force that just gives you this extra horsepower, if you like. But his teachings actually come from a very scientific starting point. So again, a little bit esoteric, and he talks about some esoteric principles. And you do have to listen to some of his stuff 2 or 3 times for it to really go in. He has got a great sense of humor as well. He's a great speaker, like Jim Rohn, like Tony. But actually, I believe he is a scientist, or he's a doctor. And I'd highly recommend, again, I'll link it in the description. It's a slightly shorter video than the rest, but it's called The Breakthrough Experience. And listen to it to 2 or 3 times, like really not just trying to listen to it and hear it, but try and really internalize it and understand it. And John DeMartini was like, another thing that I love about his stuff is he teaches that in life there isn't necessarily good experiences and bad experiences. Everything is perfectly equal. For all the positive experiences you have, there is an equal amount there's a cost associated with it, but with all the negative experiences you've had, there is a positive associated to that as well. And sometimes it's quite hard to find those positives, but if you can stack them, then actually they negate or void the negatives, and it's a very neutral experience. Highly recommend his stuff. It will give you a totally unique perspective on the universe. And John DeMartini was one of the voices in The Secret, I believe, by Rhonda Byrne, who wrote The Secret, or the movie. He was in the movie The Secret, or the documentary The Secret, about the law of attraction. So I love John, love his stuff, highly recommend him. And then coming on to number 5 is none other than Napoleon Hill. So Napoleon Hill wrote the very, very, very famous book, Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't read Think and Grow Rich, like, what are you doing? The audiobooks are online for free. It's one of the most influential success books ever written, as well as Outwitting the Devil, which is one of my favorites. And a lot of people, when they ask me what is one book I recommend, Outwitting the Devil is, if not the first book I recommend, it's at least top 2, top 3, depending on, I'll always recommend books based on where someone's at with their life and what they have or haven't read so far. But if you're listening to this, Outwitting the Devil, I would prioritize listening to it this week. I think it is one of the best personal development books, as for people that are at the early stages of their personal development journey. So if you haven't listened to Outwitting the Devil, I listen to it maybe once a year. And what's crazy is when you listen to Outwitting the Devil is, I don't want to butcher the timings and the dates, but it was written almost 100 years ago. But it was only released after he died. The foundation, his family, decided to release it. And essentially, Outwitting the Devil is a manuscript, or a manuscript of some dialogue between, I don't know if it's Napoleon Hill himself, but it's between Napoleon Hill, the author, and the devil. Now, obviously, the devil we imagine to be this fictional character with red horns, but as you get through the book, you realize actually the devil manifests itself in many different ways. And the book is a whole conversation between the author and the devil. So even the audiobook for that is available for free on YouTube, and I believe it's on Spotify as well. So definitely prioritize listening to that this week. And then for some special mentions to wrap up. So Bob Proctor, I'll link an interview I listened to recently about Bob. Bob, I believe, died or passed away last year. So rest in peace to him. But Bob is a great speaker, talks a lot about the law of attraction a little bit, but again, just one of those individuals that's just good to listen to in the background to prime your mind. He learned a lot from Napoleon Hill, so he references Napoleon Hill a lot. There's also the Founders Podcast, I think is one of my favorite personal development sources. So The Founders Podcast, it's a shame, but I don't actually remember the name of the who put the podcast together, but he just does an amazing job of distilling some of the best books and just doing biographies on some of the most influential people. So again, I'll maybe link below some of my favorite Founders podcasts. One he did on Jeff Bezos's Amazon letters to shareholders, which is a required piece of reading for any entrepreneur. Also Robert Greene. So Robert Greene, the author of 48 Laws of Power, The Law of Seduction, The Art of War. I believe one of the most impactful authors alive right now, almost a bit of a modern day philosopher. And yeah, just 48 Laws of Power. It's one of those books you have to read with an open mind. But there are some concepts in there, and you might not agree with everything, and that's okay. But just take the good with the bad. Find the stuff that you do align with. But if you're someone that is optimizing for success, it's one of those things where you can complain about the game or you can learn the rules. So I'd highly recommend immersing yourself into some of Robert Greene's work, and then Nicolo Machiavelli. And actually, Robert Greene references that Machiavelli was one of his biggest sources of inspiration from an early age. And so if you want to go straight to the source, studying Niccolò Machiavelli's works and teachings is impactful. And then finally, I've completely missed it, but Naval Ravikant. So highly recommend listening to Naval's... for context, Naval is a highly successful venture capitalist from Silicon Valley and a modern day philosopher. Start with the podcast he did with Joe Rogan, where he kind of introduces the world to some of his concepts. He also has a very famous Twitter thread. So if you go to Naval's Twitter, you'll see at the top there's a pinned Twitter thread called How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. And it just references really succinctly a whole list of principles of essentially how to be successful. And then he has some great content on YouTube as well. And then he has his book called The Almanac of Naval. Again, required reading. So I'm very confident if you immerse yourself in all of the sources that I've shared with you guys in today's video, there is a huge amount of value to be unlocked there. So I'll share those links in the description, and drop me a message on Instagram with your biggest takeaways and what you found to be most impactful. Peace.